Hi everyone, this is Abel. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm bringing you a bunch of new fantasy and science fiction books, a couple of reading updates and reviews. We're gonna have fun! But before we start, remember that if you enjoy science fiction and fantasy books, this is the perfect place for you. So if you want to see more videos like this, please consider subscribing, ring the notification bell, share this video, and also remember that I've put chapters in the description down below, so if you're searching for a specific titles of all the books I'm talking today, or if you're interested in a specific part of the video, you'll find everything in the description down below. And now, let's get started. The first book we are talking about today is Stone and Ruin by Z.S. Diamanti. This is the third book in the Stone and Sky trilogy. So this is the epic conclusion of this high fantasy, fast-paced story that I really liked. I have been lucky enough to receive a review copy for the first book, Stone and Sky, and the Stone and Sky collection. I have an extensive review in my channel that I will link somewhere here or in the description down below. I enjoyed this book so much because it is so fast-paced, so action-packed, with great characters and a very interesting world building and an overall really enjoying tone. This was written so very carefully, it flows beautifully, it's very fun. I cannot suggest you this book enough. I cannot stress enough how fun it was and how absolutely suggested it is for everybody who's looking for an epic fantasy book that kind of reminds you the vibes of what epic fantasy books were during the late 80s and early 90s, and has this really strong Dungeons and Dragons campaign atmosphere, really vivid, really colorful. First book was amazing. The collection is very useful to give you an extensive look at the characters, at the world. I'm planning to read the book 2 during the summer, and yeah, I'll put my hands on book 3 as soon as it is available, and I'll hopefully finish the trilogy before the end of the year. That will be something really new for me. It will be a win for me, given how slow I am at finishing, actually continuing a series. I always read book 1, and it is very difficult for me to read book 2 and 3 in a reasonable time, so maybe this will be the first time for me. But this one comes out in June 4th. Mushroom Blues by Adrian and Gibson. Yes, this is science fiction, and this is really difficult to describe because this is something really new. It of course takes inspiration by a few things you'll see while I try to explain it, but this is the first time in many years that I find something that it is really inspired, something really unique and so different, because in the main setting of this book, which is a city, the original inhabitants of this place, they're half human, half mushrooms. And you'll see it by the cover, where there's this dude that has mushrooms growing on his hair, and the people of this place, especially of this city, they have been conquered and struggling with colonizers. This setting looks like a little bit of cyberpunk. It has that aesthetics with huge skyscrapers and a decaying morality. The word blues should tell you that it could have a little bit of a hard-boiled vibes, but at the same time it should have the aesthetics of Blade Runner or the cyberpunk video games, and kind of a procedural structures, because it revolves around the investigation around murders, and of course those investigations will be the catalyst to explore the moral implications of colonization, at the same time the exploitation of indigenous people, because those half human, half mushrooms people have extraordinary capabilities, and they've been exploited by the conquerors, as far as I can tell. And please, Mr. Gibson, if you're watching this review and you find something that doesn't work because I'm explaining poorly, please explain it in the comment section, and everyone take a look and comment in the comment section down below. But it looks really interesting for me, not only because science fiction has many subgenres, but the cyberpunk subgenre kind of went out of the rails. It's not that popular anymore, and I know that this is not exactly specifically cyberpunk, but I really miss the aesthetics of those kind of books. But because of the structure, you don't really see that much of murder mysteries in science fiction anymore, which were much more prevalent during the golden age of cyberpunk. And at the same time, I like the fact that the world building is moving towards something that we usually don't see: mushrooms. So yeah, it looks really interesting for me, and I'm eager to see how it actually works when you read it. The structure of the chapters and the various acts and the character development. The protagonist of the story is a cop, a woman that it is forced to work side by side with one of those half-human, half-mushrooms people, and that of course will spark some kind of internal conflict, and I'm really curious to see how it works. So, Mushrooms Little Blues is already out, ebook, paperback, hardcover, everything on Amazon. The Kinslayer by K.S. Putt. This is the first book in the saga of the Fleshed Lands, a northern inspired, Viking-inspired high fantasy books with a very interesting pitch. This is about the two or more gods that have been imprisoned, and they select champions to fulfill a prophecy. And of course, as it often happens in this kind of narrations, I bet that those people that have been selected to be champions of the god will have various degrees of enthusiasm in being forced to fulfill some kind of prophecy. I bet that a few of them will be very happy and someone will be very unhappy of being handled that way. So let's see how it works and how the proper conflict of the story actually develops. Admittedly, I know very little about Norse mythology in general and of epic fantasy books that have that kind of inspiration. I know that John Gwynne is huge, that he has a lot of epic fantasy books that have that kind of aesthetic and that kind of vibes, and that a few other authors are really well established and have a really solid foothold on that kind of genre, but I know very little about it, so this can be my way to dip my toes in Norse-inspired mythology and Norse-inspired epic fantasy books. So let's see how it goes. This is really interesting to me, and you should absolutely check it out. Night Owls by Stephen Gay, a science fiction book set in a distant future on the moon. The protagonist is a thief that gets involved in a conspiracy because it looks like that the colonies on the moon are suffering power shortages, and with the help of a ragtag group of companions and helpers, we'll find to uncover and understand what's going on. I like the fact that we have a peculiar protagonist, and when we have a rogue protagonist, a kind of a morally grey but at the same time reliable and relatable characters, it always put a peculiar spin on all our stories. Let's see how it goes. The cover is stunning. Props and kudos to whoever did the cover. And this is the first book in a series. As far as I can tell, we have 4 books out already. I don't know if the story is already completed. Please, Mr. Stephen, if you see this short video and if you want to explain more about your story, feel free to do it in the comment section. This is really interesting for me. I have reviews copies for book 1 and 2, and I'll absolutely give you a review very, very soon. World of Wreckage by Abby Goldsmith. This is the third book in a epic space opera series. The first one is called Majority. This has a really complex but really original setup, a great concept, because the protagonist is a genius, someone that it is smarter than Einstein, and he becomes famous because of this, but he's also, because of that, conscripted to be part of the majority. As far as I can tell, this is the intergalactic government, which is held by mind readers. So you cannot escape. You have to obey. But somehow he devised a way to save his life and to escape that kind of dystopian oppression. And I'm really curious to see how does it works. This story has become hugely popular on Royal Road, which is a social reading app when you can share for free chapters of your story and accumulate a huge following. That is particularly famous for lit RPG and progression fantasy. I'm not sure if this one can be categorized as lit RPG or progression fantasy. This has been listed as space opera on the Amazon store. Everybody that has read this story seems to really love it because it is complex, it is huge, has a great scope and great characters. Also the companion, the side characters that follow the main protagonist during this story of trying to escape the majority. And it looks really interesting, really new, really original, and very, very deep. The first book is a chunker, and I cannot wait to have my copies to read it and review it. And yeah, really pumped about it, and you should absolutely check it out for yourself. The Night Shadows by Markus Bitner. This is a high fantasy book with a protagonist that it is absolutely relatable because he wants to be a librarian. So yeah, life goals. I bet that 95% of all the people watching this video, we will really love to try and be librarians, but life gets in the way. We cannot do it, exactly like for the protagonist of this book that cannot achieve that goal of being a librarian. And to be fair, he is quite unlucky because the guy, he loses his sister, and the main goal of the book looks to be that one, the struggle to find his sister, but at the same time the forests surrounding his city, there is something dark and ominous going on, and at the same time the city is kind of under siege because there are armies threatening to conquer the city. So you have a lot of problem conquering situation going on and struggles. And at the same time, the guy discovered that he has extraordinary abilities that are outlawed. So if someone discovers that he is able to do what he can do, it will be really hard for him. So let's see how the story goes. The setup is really interesting because I liked when you have a really relatable character that has to face impossible situations like this one. The book also looks gorgeous, so I cannot wait to read it as fast as possible and give you a review. I'm reading right now Umbra by Toro. This is a mouthful because for me as an Italian, the title and the name kind of mix up. So if I'm going to butcher the name of the book and of the author, please forgive me, forgive me. But this book is a space opera with multiple point of views and a slow burn romance and a huge scope that kind of reminds me of the setup for the lore of Battlestar Galactica, because it says that we have in the distant past of this story we had 12 colonies, 12 tribes that fled from Earth, and somehow they forgot where Earth was, and our planet become some kind of a legend for those 12 tribes. Now they have colonies, and they have a government that tries to make it work as an alliance for all of those tribes. We have 3 main characters that are a rogue, a commander, and an admiral. As far as I have read, I have seen all of those 3 characters. The first one is a pilot. She's a rogue, and she decided to left the army and to become independent and to embark on a new adventure. Then we have a guy that he was supposed always to do the same thing. He has this stoic attitude, always obedient and really ambitious too, but something happens that shatters his perception of what is going on and what is good and evil. And then we have the admiral. This is really character focused as far as I can tell. I like the fact that all the characters have a distinct voice, and I like that we have immediately specific motivations and fears. They look really vibrant and really alive, and I'm really interested to see how the major conflict of the story works, because it looks like there is a signal from the edges of the galaxy that could destroy this alliance between those 12 tribes, those 12 colonies maybe. So let's see how it works. Everything that resembles even remotely Battlestar Galactica already have as a huge place in my heart and lives rent-free inside my mind, like that series. So yeah, I'm really curious about this, and you should absolutely check it out. I'm also listening to Solar War by AG Riddle. This is the second book in the Long Winter trilogy. I had consumed book 1 a couple of weeks ago, which was a techno thriller that became space opera towards the end, because it was about a strange occurrence, because Earth was freezing in that book. It was a huge mystery why this new tide of incredibly harsh and lethal winter was ravaging around the Earth. And during book 1 we finally discover what happened, why that happened, and they kind of found a solution for that specific problem, but at the same time they unlocked an even bigger problem, and by the title you can tell where it is going, the Solar War. I cannot tell you more about it without spoiling book 1, but I really enjoyed it. Book 1 was really fast-paced and really enjoyable. The narration was absolutely amazing, some of the best voices and acting that I have ever seen in any book narration. So book 1 was fantastic, and I'm pretty sure that book 2 will be too. And I am also reading An Emperor's Gamble, the third book in the Legend of Tal series by JDL Rosell. And guys, I don't know how Josiah Rosell manages to do it, but this is absolutely incredible. Everything he writes, every sentence, every character interaction, every description of the landscape, every moment of the progression of the characters and the plot, it is so incredibly fascinating for me, and it gets inside my brain to the point that my entire personality becomes that series when I read those books. And I have to be careful because I read it on my paperback copy, and when I cannot read that I follow it on Audible, and it basically takes over my mind and I cannot think about anything else. Yeah, this is an epic fantasy series. I have a review for book 2 on my booktube channel. I have a review for book 1 on Goodreads. This is amazing. This is epic. The characters are fantastic. Tal is one of the most charismatic main protagonists of any book that I have ever read. And yeah, I was kind of sad, you know, when you know that a series is going to have a satisfying ending because you want to read it forever because you enjoyed it so much, but at the same time you recognize that you need a proper ending. But there is a sequel novella. And you have, if you're a subscriber to JD Rosell, and if you can potentially be part of his review theme, you could have been made aware that this novella already exists. And you could be potentially be involved as a reviewer for that one. So I'm pretty happy, I'm pretty eager to see how this story develop after the end of this main story of those 4 main books. Let's see how it goes. This one is already a little bit different from book 1 and book 2. It has a different setup, but I'm loving it so much because I like how the characters change in a very organic and really believable way. I'm loving it, and I cannot wait to give you a proper review. I have read Star Marshal by Jeffery Roarke Jr. This is a novella set in the same world of Wielders of Woe, Inferno, the first book, which was one of the first books that I have ever reviewed on my booktube channel. So it is really dear on my heart because, yeah, I mentioned it, I think, in my really first video about Space Opera September, back in September of 2023. The main book, the first one of the stories, I liked it quite a lot, but I could see that we had room for improvement for the narration. The story was interesting, the characters were too, but sometimes I had the feeling that we could have had more on the writing style, which was good. It was approachable and flow. It was really easy to read. But sometimes I had the feeling that we were missing something, a little bit of a connective tissues. I like to see a little bit more of of fluidity in the explanation and connection between the various scene and the character interaction and the dialogues. And I can tell you that this is better. All in all, as a novella, is pretty compelling because it gives you a kind of a complete story about a girl that has become a Star Marshal. And I cannot tell you much about it because the story is really short, and I don't want to spoil you what happens in book 1, but it works really good because you can see her motivation, what he's trying to accomplish, and trying to do her duty. So she has to finish a specific mission, and if she is able to accomplish that, if she's able to be successful, she will get something else, and she will be part of this organization. I like that the novella is pretty short and it's very action-packed. It's straight to the point, and it gives you enough to understand that characters and a little bit of the other characters in the story. It also has a pretty effective emotional punch at the end of the story, because it lets you understand that yes, accomplishing that mission was important, but at the same time it pulls up on the surface a little bit of conflict for her. So yeah, that's very interesting. It's very well written. I will say that it is better written than book 1, and that's a nice thing. Every author should be allowed to grow organically and become better and better on the craftsmanship of the actual act of writing good stories. So I'm pretty happy to see that this is good. It is even better than book 1, and if you want to have a taste of this author's ability to tell you a coherent and interesting story, just try this one. And yeah, also of course check out book 1, which is Wielders of Woe Inferno, and yeah, absolutely check it out. I also had the pleasure to read a review copy for Dark Town by Palmer Pickering. This is the first book in a lit RPG series that it is very funny, hilarious at the time, a little bit dark and really action-packed book. You could read it without knowing anything about lit RPGs, because it actually works really well as an high fantasy book in and of itself. It was my first experience with lit RPGs, so I knew on a general way what to expect from lit RPG. The name of this subgenre is pretty self-explanatory, because those are novels that also have a really heavy influences of from the mechanics of video games. And at the same time, in that subgenre, you have a very large amount of shades of how heavy inspired they are from video games. The heavier one, they actually have stats in the book, because characters actually they progress like characters in video games. So by grinding and by fighting and by gathering resources and artifacts, you become more powerful, like actually in video games. This one, Dark Time, is lighter on that scale, because you don't have anything of that. Of course, you have the main protagonist becoming powerful and gathering a lot of stuff to unlock parts of the story and to progress the plot, but you don't have that kind of stats in the book. And in a way, I think it's a wise choice, because it makes the book really interesting for usual casual high fantasy readers, or even really grumpy high fantasy readers like me, but at the same time interesting for lit RPG fans too. Of course, I think this is a good introduction to a very funny, really compelling introduction to that subgenres. So for me it was a win, because knowing just on a surface level what to expect from this kind of book, I think it would have been harder for me to connect to this subgenre if it was that heavy with stats and a lot of additional materials that you had to read and follow during the book. So yeah, I appreciated the fact that the structure was much more approachable for a casual reader like that. And also I will say that it is all in all overall a very approachable and easy read, because you have to know that many lit RPG are actually portal fantasy. It means that the protagonist has to transpass in another world. Many of those lit RPGs are actually science fiction more than fantasy, because the protagonist starts in our world and then there's a portal and they end up in a video games and they're stuck in the video games. They have to find a way to come back in our world. This book, Dark Town, doesn't have any of that. This has a 100% fantasy setting. It has a really approachable, very easy to understand and to visualize medieval aesthetic. The protagonist is a girl that works in a tavern with her mother, and you see that she doesn't have a very easy life, because she has to work to sustain her family, because she the rest of her family, brothers and father, they have disappeared, and they have disappeared in that dark town. There is this tradition in the city when the protagonist lives, where the man, they cyclically try to enter a game. They call it the game. It means that they have to play a specific part in this quest to find dragon eggs and jewels, and trying to become rich. And the deeper you go inside this game, in this tradition, and in this search for riches, the higher is the reward. The fact is that not many people get to end the game and to get that rich, and maybe people, they get lost. They are stuck playing endlessly in in that game that has a huge maze-like setting at the beginning, and that you have the dark town that gives the name to the novel. It is really funny and really interesting, and at the beginning it's a little bit bizarre because you have to work a little bit to understand how it works, because the protagonist has to gather resources and has to become powerful, more and more powerful, exactly how it would work in a video games, and to understand a little bit how the rest of the setting actually works, what she can do and what she cannot do to survive and to fight. And there are specific rules for what happens when you get killed in the game, because you basically respawn at the beginning of the game or outside at the perimeter of the setting of the game. So it is really interesting. At the beginning, if you have to kind of give the book time to explain you properly how it works, but it is written in a very easy way to you'll understand it pretty quickly. The gold of the story is not just because it is very funny and it is really approachable and the protagonist is a really relatable girl, but it is the co-protagonist, which is Half Pint, which is on the cover of the book. He is a hobgoblin, a shapeshifter that transforms in a cat, and he works in the tavern with the girl and her mother, and he helps with them. She actually works with the family, and if they don't pay him with a specific kind of currency, he will basically make a mess in the kitchen. And I cannot stress enough how funny and how fascinating of a character this one is. Half Pint is funny, he's wise, he's cunning in a way, and he has this extensive backstory that it is slowly delivered during the whole length of the book, and you get to know him better and better. And the funny thing is that the protagonist, the girl, actually, she knows him, but just on a surface level. And the more time we spend with her, the more time we spend with him, the more we discover about the past of this one. And it made me think about my life and about what I think of all the people I interact on a daily basis, about what I think I know about those people. Because as far as we can tell, that goblin has been working with her, with the protagonist and her mother for years, but they know very little about him. And just at the beginning of the book, when she approaches for the first time the game, you'll see that she realizes how little she knows, but she cannot really fathom how big his backstory is and how influential it will be during the rest of the book. So Chef Kiss, that character is amazing, and at the same time, even if this is not a heavy-handled theme book, it's not the kind of book that is trying to shovel into your mouth all of a grandiose reflection about life. I found a few really very well written sentences that made me question a few things about my life, that made me reflect about the way I approach life in general. This approaching life like something that you have to grind, and without being ashamed to desire to be better and be more powerful and more influential, without being a negative influence of other life and other people's. Yeah, even if the book is not that kind of heavy theme book, it had this effect of me, this collateral damage, not damage. It was something really funny to experience. Also, the book, either the ebook edition or the paperback one, it is filled to the brim with absolutely beautiful illustrations. This is a joy to read because it is very well produced, very well formatted. The layout is very readable. The illustrations are all extremely effective, and they are positioned just after the fact, so they will not spoil the book. They actually enhance the immersion in the book, because this is a very light on description. So those illustrations will do the heavy lifting on that side. It is also on the shorter side. I think it's around 90,000 words, so it's a pretty quick read. But absolutely, this is highly recommended. This is the first lit RPG I have ever read, but it is also the first Palmer Pickering's book that I have ever read, and this is absolutely should be absolutely an author that I will follow religiously. I will absolutely read Heliotrope. Everybody's been gushing about that epic fantasy book, which was supposed to be a standalone, but I know there will be more about that book. So yeah, it was a beautiful experience. It's very nice and very easy to read book, very funny, and absolutely go and read it and check it out and let me know what you think about it. I have also read Pathlighter by Rob Leigh. I was lucky enough this time again to have a physical copy of the book, and this is a very fast-paced and very dramatic and very hard-hitting epic fantasy book that in a way kind of reminded me of the first Mistborn trilogy, with a very deep lore, a very deep, very complex world building. In this world you have a very peculiar take on deities and gods and on the way they influence actual life, because the gods are very much distant in that world, and you cannot and you don't know if they actually exist, but you have other entities that are trying to gather control, and at the same time you have the main group, the core cast of protagonists that have been blessed in a way from the gods, and they have supernatural abilities. Our main point of view, the one that we follow the more during the book, is a guy that can control fire, and he really doesn't want that. He really has a conflicted relationship with that power and with the deity that it supposedly gave him this extraordinary ability. And even if he doesn't want it, a group of rebels, they collect him and they are trying to bring him and to make him part of this growing rebellion, and to let the guy use those abilities for what they think it is a good cause. So we have a pretty simple setting, pretty simple concept at the beginning, which is really familiar, of the guy that discovers those peculiar powers, and then he has to be part of this rebellion against conquering forces. So it is really familiar, but it is at the same time pretty complex. It has a pretty steep learning curve at the beginning, because there's a lot of things going on and you have a lot of point of views cycling, so you don't follow just that guy, but you follow even all the other guys. I think we have 4 main point of views, and then we have point of views from the villains too. Each and every one of those guys have different abilities than they, of course, all the others. They're much more experienced in using those special abilities. So he's the one who has to struggle to try and keep control the most of those powers, but the others too, because there are specific limitations. The more you use those powers, the more you became susceptible to to suffer collateral damage for those powers. So all the world building and all of that side is really interesting, and it's really fascinating and really deep. And you can see that it has been poured a lot of heart and a lot of effort to make it work effortlessly. Pardon me in my choice of words here. So it is really complex and really fascinating. The characters are all also pretty well fleshed out, because all of them, the protagonist and the others, they all have a specific background. They all have relationships, because they're a group. Of course, he is the fish out of water. He has to blend in, try to understand if he actually wants to blend in or not. But all the others, they've been a group, kind of a family for a long period of time. So you see that when they talk, the way they interact, they has this expansive backstory, and also a lot of problems and a lot of drama going on between them. And they work as characters because they have this complex backstory that influences all of their decisions, all of their attitude towards the mission, towards the rebellion, and towards the way they approach this struggle, this war. So they're all very compelling, they're all very interesting. Of course, you can like them or not. And that happens with multiple point of views in every book. You'll have a bunch of characters that you like and a bunch of characters that you have to follow even if you don't like them, because you have multiple perspectives. I quite liked the main protagonist, and I liked a couple of the other points of views, not all of them, but I don't think I was supposed to love every one of those. So it works. I have a problem with this story though. So it is still recommended. It is still a very good book. It is really enjoyable, and the action scenes are very well choreographed, and they're very effective. They're really bombastic. You have those huge set pieces, very cinematographic. The problem for me is the pacing. And it is a me problem, okay? Because I am a character reader, I like slow burns, I like character pieces. But I think that in order to let people and readers really get attached to your main protagonist and the main core cast of characters, you have to give them time to breathe. And there has to be a specific build-up to those bombastic set pieces and action scenes, and we really don't have that in this book, because the book starts with a very short introductory scene, and then the action is cranked up to 11 for the rest of the book. It is exhausting. It is so big and so powerful, and there are so many fight scenes going on constantly. That's a problem for me, because the problem is that it actually almost makes me dull, and the action almost turns in this gray haze of relentless action that never stops. Actually, it stops. There are moments when you have times for the dialogues and the plot progression. But overall, I don't think that the book is very well balanced. I would have preferred to have more time at the beginning to get to know the main protagonist and all the others, and then slowly building up to that kind of vibe when we had a lot of fight scenes and a lot of consequences. Now, to be fair, every fight has an emotional core, so it helps you get attached to the characters as you go. I don't think that the fighting have been poorly choreographed or poorly plotted out. All of those have specific consequence, and it's not like that you have You know, there are poorly constructed books when every fight is like you have a reset, and they begin and they develop and they finish in the same way, and then you have again and again and again and again the same kind of fight. No, it doesn't work that way. Every fight fight here, every huge conflict progresses the story in a specific way, so it's affected in a way. But I found myself in a scene where the characters were on a boat and something happened and they have to try and stay alive, and it was so huge and so complex and so powerful that I thought, this looks like the end of the book. This looks like the ending fight, the final fight of the book, and then it looks like it finished. And then the moment that it finished, it continued and it ramped it up again, the stakes. And as I told you, this is a me problem because I perceived it that way because of what I like. And I'm pretty sure that if you love action-packed book, this will be amazing for you. If you prefer that kind of epic action with complex action and a believable world building in a way those power are used and the consequence that they will have on the characters and on the story, this will be absolutely a 5-star and 10 out of 5 stars. For me, I would love it to be a little bit more fleshed out in the beginning and to have a slower progression to that point. In a way, it was like we had the Sanderlanche 3 or 4 times in this book. You know, if you don't know what the Sanderlanche is the end of every book from Brender Stanton, when you have a huge set pieces and you have a bunch of chapters when the action is ramped up, it's cranked up to 11, and all the plot threads they connect, and you have a bunch of plot twists all collected at the end. This one has had too many of those vibes, too many set pieces scattered throughout the book in a way that actually grabbed you by the throat and pulled you inside the story. As I told you, it depends from the kind of reader you are, for what you're searching from a book, like what kind of adventure you love. For me, it was a little bit too much, but I'm pretty sure that we'll have a better implementation of plot, characters and action in the rest of the story, because I can see that the end of the book is better compared to the beginning of that side. It works better as a cohesive story, and the action is more meaningful. So I enjoyed it very much. I had this specific problem with the book, but you know, the perfect book doesn't exist. What I think is a problem for many other readers, probably it will be a plus. They will love it even more because it is that much action-packed. So yeah, great job, Rob. The book was really enjoyable, and I absolutely suggest you to give it a try. And I also finished The Fires of Heaven, the fifth book in the Wheel of Time series. As far as I can tell, this is one of the make it or break it moment for the series, because I think that this is the moment when the series actually becomes something really, really different from the actual classic epic fantasy series that people think it is. And this is where you collect all that was planted in book 4. There was a moment when it began to diverge from the actual classic pattern for epic fantasy books. I enjoyed the book, but I also didn't enjoy it. So as you know, I don't finish book that I don't really like. So if it looks like a chore for me, the experience is like a chore for me, I don't finish it. This was really close to be too far for me, because there is a middle section that it is all centered around Nynaeve and Egwene Pickering, which are two of the main core cast from the story, and it was so stupid for me. All their interaction were so annoying. I understand when they were coming from and what they were trying to achieve, and it gave them a specific character development, and this book is much more character focused than the others, so the plot really little happens, and it all happens at the end of the book. But it had a little bit more of Rand too, that we have seen really little in book 3, a little bit more in book 4, and a little bit more in book 5. So I really enjoyed that, and I enjoyed every single page with Rand and every single page with Matt too. But in this one we have too much of meandering and bickering and stupid motivations, and I understand why people think that the middle section of this series, from books 5 I think, or from book 6 to book 10, they call it the slog because it's too slow and very little happens. I don't know if I would define it that way. I don't know if book 5 is already in the slog, but there's a huge chunk of the book that I didn't enjoy it that much. But the ending is huge, it's fantastic, it has those amazing set pieces, the final battle is beautiful, and it has a twist that I didn't see coming, but that in hindsight is completely reasonable. So yeah, loved it, that part. All in all, this is my least favorite book of the series, and many people says that the rest of the book until book 10 will be even worse. So yeah, I'm dubious, and I'm a little bit worried about what my experience will be with the rest of the series, but let's see. I'll tell you when I go there, and I give you reviews when I read each and every one of those books. That's all I've got for you today. This video is way too long, so thank you if you managed to stay here until the end. And I'm really grateful because we just crossed the 300 followers and subscribers mark here on YouTube. I am deeply grateful for all of you, for being here, to watching to my videos, for each and every one of you who decides to comment. But if you don't want to comment, it's the same, it's good, we are friends nonetheless. And thank you for all the help you are giving me to make this little community a little bit bigger and always welcoming and safe for all the science fiction and fantasy aficionados. And of course, if you enjoy science fiction and fantasy books, this is the perfect place for you, and if you want to see more videos like this, you have more like here, consider subscribing, leave a like, share this video if you want to see more, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.